All right, so what do you need to be able to write, compose orchestral music? And this is basically in case there's anyone that still don't have a fully functional workspace with your sequencer, your controller, your keyboard, libraries, a template. This is sort of like a getting started.
First day of school. First day of school, that's right.
So what do you need? You need one of these. It doesn't need to be a Mac. This is a, I think, like 2-3-year-old computer. MacBook Air, 8 gigs of RAM, not a very powerful computer. The more powerful the computer, the less limitations that you're gonna have, but still completely doable to start with something like this, all right? Keyboard, mouse. Now, it doesn't need to be a big keyboard like this one. You can have like a 3, 4, 5 octaves keyboard, smaller keyboard will do. All right, another thing, this is a MIDI controller. This will allow us to, for example, we're writing for strings and to go from piano or soft to mezzo forte or forte, louder. And so among other things, panning, this is very important. Now, there are some keyboards that come with these faders built in the keyboard. So maybe you don't need 2 pieces of hardware. Maybe with one keyboard, you already have the faders and the knobs. And the third thing that you are going to need is a sequencer, a DAW, digital audio workstation. Logic for Mac and Cubase, both PC, Mac. I'm using Cubase. If you don't use Cubase, no problem. There are others. I'm going to be starting with this. The goal is to, 1, have the sequencer installed here. 2, have the libraries, sounds that we can play. But now to be able to play them, like the strings, brass, piano, we will need to have a keyboard connected here and a MIDI controller connected here so we can write dynamics for the strings, woods, etc. That's it. Now, in this video, you will see me connecting this particular device, keyboard computer, happens to be a Mac in this case. The other computer that I usually use to compose is a PC. So as you can imagine, it's going to be slightly different for everyone. The way I configure this device is different than if you were to configure a nano control, which is also a MIDI controller, but just different brand, and you would configure it differently. What do you mean configure? Well, I want this fader to be modulation, CC number 1. I'll explain this later. This one is expression, CC11. I'll have to configure this fader for it to be expression, to be CC11. There's a specific way to configure this particular device, which is different than, let's say, Korg's Nano Control. I'm going to show you the what you need to do, the how you need to do it. Most likely, you can either figure it out yourself or contact with the tech team. And if you've got any issues, they will help you configure a specific device, taking into account what OS you're using, Mac or PC, and what sequencer you're using, Logic, Cubase, DP, etc. All right, so let's connect these guys to this computer. So we're basically going to need 3 things. In this case, it's a USB cable and another USB cable. That's the first thing. So connect the USB cable to the back of your device and then connect it to your computer.
Whoa, slow down, egghead.
Second step, some of these are plug and play, meaning you can connect them to your Mac or PC and the computer is going to recognize this device and you don't have to install any drivers. Many, though, you will have to install drivers. So when you buy a unit like this, by the way, it doesn't have to be this particular one. It can be any other. But again, when you connect them to your computer, some of these are plug and play and they work already, and some of them need to install drivers. Most likely these days, you're gonna download them from their manufacturer's website, download the drivers, install them, and so now when you plug them, it's gonna recognize them. Still, once this is done, you're going to need to go to your sequencer. So the sequencer actually sees this guy, okay? Recap, connect the cable. Your computer is already going to recognize this. If not, you're gonna have to install drivers. And then finally, in your sequencer, it's gonna be Logic or Cubase, Digital Performer. You're going to have to configure it so it sees this particular device and this particular device, all right? Let's do it. See, in Cubase is very simple, and so in Logic, it's basically here in the studio setup, MIDI port setup, and because I installed the drivers earlier, see the UC33 USB MIDI controller? It shows up here. I haven't done anything. It shows up because I installed the drivers. I just have to make sure that's visible and active, basically, right? That's it. Very simple. Now the next step is going to be to configure this device so it does what I want it to do. Now in this case, for the keyboard, I would need to configure it because I don't have to tell this keyboard that this is the C note and this is the G note because everything's mapped out, obviously. But in this case though, for my particular workflow, I want this first fader to be modulation, CC number 1, and I want this to be expression, CC11. This third one, for me, I want it to be breath control, CC2, and I want this particular one to be CC10 for panning. But again, you may have this one or you may have a different one. Now for the how, you will have to do a little bit of figuring out yourself. Now just for efficiency purpose, I'm going to continue explaining things in this computer, but it will be the exact same thing if we were talking about this computer. In this case, what you're seeing here on the screen is Cubase, and this is an empty project. So what we need now is to load these sounds. Now, where do we get those sounds? Well, there are different options. Obviously, we've got the paid libraries that sound fantastic these days, but also there are other options. Sometimes when we buy the sequencer, that sequencer comes with some basic sounds, like Logic, for example. Contact, which is the sampler, will come with some sounds as well, included in the sampler. There are great free libraries as well. And actually, just with those free libraries, it's a fantastic starting point if that's the only thing that you have. What I would like for you at the end is to have all these configured as I described earlier and have 2 tracks, piano and the strings ensemble patch loaded. And to have those tracks always loaded when you open Cubase or Logic, so you don't have to load them all the time. But for now, let's load those 2 sounds. Each sequencer is going to be different. In Cubase, I'm gonna add an instrument track. I'm gonna load Contact. Contact is the sampler. They've got a free version and a paid version. Some libraries, when you buy libraries, they will play with the free version of Contact. Other libraries, though, they will require you to buy the paid version of Contact. There are other libraries like Orchestral tools or Spitfire, East West, that they use their own sampler. Contact has been industry standard for the past 10, 15 years, 20 years, and many libraries use this one. So Contact, add tracks, and boom, here's the first track. Here's Contact. I'm going to load a piano. And I'm gonna name this piano. And now we've got our first track. Now we can close this. We're gonna load the second track. I'm gonna show you another sampler. This is Halion. This is Steinberg's sampler. So it's like Contact, the one that we loaded earlier, just another one. Just trying to show you that they don't always look like this. This is Contact, great. This is Halion, awesome. This other one here, this is the Spitfires sampler for the Abbey Road library. We're not gonna use this one, remove track. Now this one, the strings ensemble. I'm gonna load some strings. And I'm gonna select this strings full ensemble. This particular library is Iconica from Steinberg. And again, just showing you different libraries, but you don't have to buy those right away. In fact, they are not even my main to-go libraries.
I said it.
My goal is for you to end with something like this. You've got your sequencer, you've got your 2 sounds, a piano and the strings ensemble. You've got your keyboard connected and you can play something like this. And also, you've got your controller connected, and so you can do something like this. The first thing that I always explain when it comes to orchestral vocal production or orchestral programming is, well, there are instruments that can perform long notes, like let's say violins. And they can hold these notes for a long time. An oboe, a flute, things like this, right? Now there are instruments that can't, right? Piano, for example, when I hit this key, I don't have control over the volume of that note. It has a fixed decay. It's a long decay, but it's a fixed decay. There's no control over the volume of that note. Generally speaking, like in the real world, like the acoustic world. If we go back to the strings, if you're using a keyboard, I have lack of control. I need something else to be able to control the volume of that note and what that note does. And that's when something like this comes into place. controlling pure volume like this, not good actually, it's not bueno. Why? That is volume. But if you think, imagine like a violin, right? When they perform softer, it's not just lowering volume, it's also the timbre is different. When they play louder, it's not just louder in volume, the timbre changes, more aggressive type of sound. So that timbric difference between the soft and the loud notes, we need to be able to transition. And I'm gonna get just a tiny bit technical here, but the way they have been built, it's like this. They record each note at different dynamics. So for example, let's see the C note, this one right here. They'll record the piano layer, let's say, the mezzo forte layer, and the forte layer. And they record, this would be the audio file. And this one, which is a little bit louder, and then this one that's louder. What this allows us to do is transition from these more piano layers to mezzo forte to forte to fortissimo, right? And so we can crossfade from something like this into the different layers. So when we are here, we hear this. As we bring this up, there's a moment where the engine, the sampler, this guy, it's going to lower the volume of this piano layer and start bringing up the volume of this mezzo forte layer, right? And we're gonna hear the transition from this layer to the next one. Boom, we are here. Timbre changes, see? Ooh, great. Now, from here to there, same thing, right? And so by using CC1 modulation, all the libraries that you are going to be using have been built. So when you use modulation, by the way, modulation is the mod wheel it's the left side of each piano. That mod wheel is modulation, CC1. So you can use that mod wheel as well to do the same thing, to crossfade between the different dynamic layers. Generally, the more expensive the library, the more layers. Why more layers? More realism. Why more expensive? Because it takes longer and it's more expensive to record the library with more layers because it takes more time in the studio. Let's focus on what really matters. Let's just take this one step farther. 3 layers? 5 layers? Isn't this a simplification of what a real instrument could actually do and the infinite layers of dynamics that they can go through? So again, more expensive libraries will have more layers, but it's still never going to be like the real thing, and we have to understand that. There's no way to overcome that. It's just a different thing. A live strings section is a live strings section, and a strings library, it's a strings library. It's 2 different things. The strings library tries to emulate the real thing, but it's not the real thing. It's just 2 different things, and that's not bad. It's just understanding that's different. It's perfectly fine. We can get very close to the real thing by using modulation and expression at the same time. Modulation does the job. I just explained this, you understand. Now, expression is pure volume. That's what it is. See? Nothing, I don't hear anything because all the way down, as I bring it up, it brings up the volume, but it doesn't change the timbre. So if we set this one here at the middle, basically it's mezzo forte, and now we can change the volume of that mezzo forte sample, but it's still always going to be mezzo forte. It changes the volume, but not the timbre. Now, if you're using both at the same time, basically you're adding a layer of volume on top of the crossfading between the different dynamic layers, and that enhances the dynamics when you are recording samples, when you are using sample libraries. And so you get an enhanced effect to the dynamics. So it goes like this. Way more alive. So use both. Recap one more time. Computer, keyboard, you need these faders. Sometimes the keyboard will have the faders built in it. Most of the times these keyboards will have the mod wheel, which is this guy here, but we are missing expression. Just using modulation or the mod wheel won't cut it. It will be a little bit limited. Hey, you watched the video till the end, congratulations! Alright, so just comment with the I'm a composer hashtag so I know that you've watched the video till the end, and also please consider subscribing if you haven't already. Click the subscribe button. This does 3 things. First, YouTube is gonna show our videos in your homepage. They are gonna be there when you need them. Second, helps our channel grow, makes us happy to see that number increase. And 3, most importantly, it lets the algorithm know that what we are doing matters, and YouTube is gonna put our videos in front of composers like you that want to grow and learn. We're gonna continue to post free videos to add value, but please help us reach more people. Alright, thanks for watching, thanks for your time, congrats again for watching the video till the end. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.